Max stood at the entrance of the grand chamber, his heart racing despite the calm expression on his face. He wasn't nervous, not really. He was used to high-stakes situations. But this was different. The alien queen, Vera, sat at the far end of the room on her throne, her gaze fixed on him like a predator watching its prey. Her appearance was striking, as always. Tall and lithe, with dark purple skin that shimmered under the light of the chamber's massive crystal chandeliers. She was a figure of immense power, the kind of power that could end a life with a single word. Max straightened his suit, his posture professional but relaxed. He had to admit there was something mesmerizing about her. But that wasn't why he was here. His mission was to secure a peace treaty with the Xyrillians, a species that had long been at odds with humanity. Negotiations had been difficult, but he had one trump card up his sleeve: his sense of humor. In tense situations, humor had a way of breaking down walls, and if there was one thing Max knew, it was how to push the right buttons. The guards around. The queen stood silent, their imposing forms adding to the tension. Max's eyes flickered around the room, and then he allowed himself a small grin. He could feel the pressure building, but this was his moment to break the ice. "Your Majesty," Max said, bowing just enough to be respectful, but not too much to. Showed deference. "It's an honor to be in your presence. I've heard so much about you." Vera's eyes narrowed slightly, her expression unreadable. She was known for her commanding presence, and most humans would tremble in her presence. Not Max, though. He wasn't intimidated. "I trust the reports are accurate." Vera's voice was smooth, carrying an underlying power that sent a chill down Max's spine. She wasn't just a queen by title. She was a ruler, a strategist, and a force of nature. Max leaned forward, his grin widening. "Well, the stories don't do you justice. I mean, come on. You're practically a legend." The queen didn't flinch. She simply tilted her head as if studying him. "And what do you seek from me, human?" Her words were measured, but there was a sharpness to them. She didn't suffer fools. Max took a breath, straightening up. "I came here to negotiate a peace treaty," he said, voice serious now. "But honestly, it's been a long trip, and I'm starting to think maybe there's an easier way to get what I want." Vera raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "An easier way? I'm curious what you have in mind." Max took a step forward, lowering, his voice just enough to make it feel personal, like they were sharing a secret. "Well, if you're offering a treaty, how about a partnership?" He paused for dramatic effect, his grin widening again. "Perhaps a marriage?" The words hung in the air for a moment, and the room fell eerily silent. Max's grin faltered slightly as he realized the guards had stopped breathing. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Vera didn't flinch, didn't show even the slightest hint of surprise. Instead, she looked at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether he was joking or being serious. "You jest," she said. Her voice cool, but there was a glint of something in her eyes that Max couldn't quite place. "Joking?" Max's voice softened, his tone playful. "Who said anything about joking?" He leaned in just a little closer. "After all, you've got the power, the beauty, and frankly the brain power to match. What more could a guy ask for?" He flashed her a wink. For a brief second, there was a flicker of something, surprise, amusement, maybe even interest, in the queen's expression. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared. Then, without a word, Queen Vera raised her hand, signaling the guards around her. One by one, they filed out of the room, their boots echoing on the stone floor as they left, leaving only her and Max alone in the chamber. The doors shut behind them with a heavy thud. Max blinked, looking around at the empty space. "Okay, that was unexpected," he muttered to himself. He wasn't sure what kind of reaction he had been expecting, but this wasn't it. In the Silence that followed, Max realized just how alone he now was with one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Vera looked at him steadily, her posture relaxed now that the room was empty. "You've been bold, human," she said, her voice softer than before, but no less commanding. "Most would cower before me, and yet you make jokes." Max couldn't help but laugh. "It's how I deal with pressure. You'll find I'm not like most humans." He tilted his head. "You didn't have to send the guards away, though. Was that really necessary?" The Queen's lips curled into the faintest of smiles, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I find that sometimes silence speaks louder than words. And you are interesting. Perhaps I will indulge your request." For a moment, Max raised an eyebrow. "Indulge my request? I was serious, you know. I think you and I could make a great team. You've got the strength, the strategy, and the beauty to rule an empire. I just thought I'd be a great addition to the team, that's all." Vera's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Max felt a hint of unease. "You speak boldly, but do you truly understand what you're asking for?" Max chuckled, trying to keep the mood light. "A bit of a test, huh? Well, I can handle a challenge. What do you say? A partnership? A marriage? Whatever you want to call it. I think we could change the galaxy together." The Queen stood from her throne, moving toward him with a fluid grace that took Max's breath away. She was every bit the Queen, and then some. When she stopped in front of him, her gaze intense, she spoke again. "Marriage, partnership, or whatever you choose to call it, it's not that simple." Her voice softened again, though her eyes never lost their sharpness. "But I will allow you to prove yourself human. If you can show me you are worthy, then perhaps there is something here to explore." Max's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't expected that. He was ready for a diplomatic mission. But this was something far more dangerous and far more intriguing. "You've got my attention," Max said, his tone suddenly serious, his playful smile replaced by something else, something deeper, something that matched the weight of the Queen's gaze. And just like that, the game had changed. Max had barely finished speaking when the Queen's eyes narrowed once more. The air between them was thick with something he couldn't quite place. Was it curiosity, caution, or something deeper that he had yet to understand? The silence stretched, and Max took a breath, his mind racing. He had expected a response, but not one like this. He had expected to be laughed off or brushed aside, not pulled into a dangerous game where the stakes seemed so high. Vera's expression was unreadable, but the tension in her posture told Max that this wasn't a simple test. She wasn't just playing with him for fun. She was considering his offer seriously, and that made everything much more real. "Prove myself," Max echoed, stepping back slightly. He wanted to keep his cool, but his heart was beating a little faster now. "What exactly do you mean by that?" Vera's gaze didn't shift, her eyes like two glowing orbs in the dimly lit chamber. "Surviving on my world is no easy feat, human. You will face trials, physical and mental, designed to test your resolve. If you truly believe that you are worthy of ruling beside me, then prove it. But remember, the risks are not insignificant." Max's lips curled into a half-smile, trying to push back the growing sense of anxiety. This was all moving much faster than he had anticipated, but part of him was excited. The idea of surviving on an alien world alongside a queen who was both terrifying and magnificent was thrilling. So no pressure, huh? He joked, though the words felt forced even to his own ears. Vera didn't smile. "The pressure will come soon enough." With a slow movement, the Queen raised a hand, signaling for Max to follow. She turned and began walking toward a set of massive double doors at the far end of the room. As she passed, her cloak billowed out behind her, a fluid movement that seemed to command the space. Max had to force himself to focus on her words and not her undeniable presence. These trials are designed to test your limits, both physically and mentally, Vera continued, her voice low but clear. Only if you survive will I consider your request. If you fail, you will leave this planet alive, but your reputation among my people will be destroyed. Max didn't flinch. He wasn't the type to back down from a challenge, especially not when it involved something as intriguing as this. I didn't come here to fail, he said, his tone firm now. I came to show you that I can handle whatever you throw at me. Vera stopped at the doors, turning to look at him over her shoulder. We shall see, human. You may have confidence, but survival is not the same as strength. It is about understanding the environment, using it to your advantage, and overcoming your own limitations. Max swallowed, but he stood tall. I'm ready. With a slight nod, Vera signaled for the doors to open. They creaked as they swung inward, revealing a vast expanse beyond. Max stepped forward, the weight of the moment settling over him like a heavy cloak. What lay before him was unlike anything he had ever seen. The landscape stretched out in all directions, jagged mountains rising in the distance, surrounded by dense forests that seemed to pulse with life. In the air, strange creatures soared, their wings gleaming in the faint light of a red sun hanging. Low on the horizon, it was a world unlike Earth, one that seemed wild and unforgiving, yet oddly beautiful. This is Zerelia, Vera's voice broke through the silence. My people live in harmony with the land, but it demands respect. The trials you will face are not simply to test your strength. They will test your ability to adapt. Max's gaze swept across the terrain. This wasn't a place where someone could just stumble through. It was a world where every step mattered, and the wrong move could be deadly. Adaptation, huh? Max said, forcing a grin as he turned back to her. I think I can handle that. The Queen's eyes seemed to gleam in approval, but there was a flicker of something else. A challenge, perhaps, hidden beneath her calm demeanor. You'll need more than confidence, she replied. You'll need every ounce of your intelligence and resourcefulness. Max nodded, his mind already working. This wasn't going to be easy, but it wasn't supposed to be. He was here to prove himself, to show that he was more than just a diplomat, more than a negotiator with a smile. He could survive, and he could earn her respect. But it wouldn't come quickly, or without difficulty. Vera motioned for him to follow as she began walking again, this time leading him toward a narrow path that seemed to wind its way into the heart of the forest. The trees here were towering and strange, with thick, twisting roots that seemed to grasp at the earth like the fingers of some ancient creature. The air was thick with the scent of moss and damp earth, and the sound of distant creatures echoed in the background. What's the first trial? Max asked, falling into step beside her. He tried to sound casual, but he knew this was only the beginning. The first trial is one of survival, Vera said simply. You will be given no food, no water, and no shelter. You must find all of these on your own, and you will do so without any outside help. She paused, glancing at him with a piercing gaze. Fail, and you will not see the second trial. Max felt his stomach tighten, but he kept his voice steady. I'm used to being resourceful. Vera nodded slightly, though her expression remained neutral. Then we begin. She stepped forward, and Max followed without hesitation. He had been to difficult places, dealt with difficult situations, but this was different. The weight of her challenge, the quiet power she carried was enough to make anyone second-guess themselves. But Max wasn't the type to back down. They reached the edge of the forest, and Vera turned to face him. The trial begins now. Find shelter, water, and food. You have until the sun sets to complete the first task." Max took a deep breath, scanning the surroundings. He had no idea what Xerilia's forests held, what dangers lurked in the shadows. But one thing was certain. He was about to find out. Veyra's piercing gaze never left him. "Good luck, human. You will need it." And with that, she turned and disappeared into the trees, leaving Max standing alone in the vast, alien wilderness. Max stood at the edge of the dense forest, the weight of the Queen's challenge pressing down on him. The trees before him were unlike any he had ever seen. Their bark was silver, and the leaves shimmered in hues of violet and blue, casting strange shadows on the forest floor. Strange creatures darted through the branches above, their movements quick and elusive. Max took a deep breath, trying to calm his nerves. This wasn't just about survival. It was about proving himself worthy to stand beside a queen. Veyra had made that very clear. The pressure was heavy, but Max had always thrived under pressure. He knew how to adapt. He knew how to make things work. With a quick glance at the setting sun, he knew time was short. His first task was simple in theory. Find food, water, and shelter, but the forest felt alive in a way he wasn't used to. The air was thick with humidity, and every step he took seemed to make the forest hold its breath. The soft rustling of leaves and the occasional distant cry of a creature kept him on edge. He set off into the trees, moving cautiously at first. Every noise, every shift in the shadows made him pause. He wasn't used to a world this foreign, where every rustle of the leaves could mean danger or discovery. Max's first priority was water. He knew that without it, he wouldn't last long. He scanned the ground, looking for signs of a stream or a water source. The air smelled earthy and damp, but there was no obvious sign of fresh water nearby. He walked for what felt like hours, carefully stepping over roots and around thick patches of undergrowth. The further he went, the denser the forest became, and the more foreign it felt. As he pushed through a thick cluster of ferns, he spotted a small clearing ahead. His eyes widened when he saw what lay in the center of it, a crystal-clear pool of water shimmering in the pale light of the sun. It was like something out of a dream, untouched and perfect. Max knelt beside it, dipping his hands into the water to drink. The cool liquid was refreshing, and he drank deeply, filling his body with the nourishment it so desperately needed. But just as he began to feel a momentary sense of relief, a sound echoed through the trees, a low, guttural growl. Max froze, his heart leaping in his chest. He stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his pants as his eyes darted around the clearing. The growl came again, closer this time. He could hear something moving in the shadows, something large. He didn't need to wait to find out what it was. Whatever it was dangerous. He needed to get out of the clearing, and fast. Max took a step back, keeping his eyes on the surrounding trees. The growl came again, and suddenly a massive shape emerged from the underbrush. A creature, towering and powerful, its eyes glowing with a fierce orange hue. Its fur was dark, almost black, with long, jagged claws that scraped against the forest floor. It was unlike anything Max had ever seen, but its intent was clear. It saw him as prey. Max's instincts kicked in. He turned and sprinted, his heart racing as he pushed through the underbrush. The creature roared behind him, its massive feet pounding the earth as it gave chase. Max's mind raced, calculating his next move. He needed to outrun it, but he couldn't just run forever. He needed a plan. He dashed through the trees, glancing over his shoulder to see the creature gaining on him. It was fast, much faster than he had anticipated. The growls were getting louder, more intense, as the beast closed in. His breathing became ragged, but he pushed himself harder, focusing on nothing but putting distance between himself and the monster. Then, in a moment of clarity, Max saw it, a narrow gap between two large trees. It was risky, but if he could make it through, he might be able to lose the creature in the dense forest. Without thinking, he veered toward the gap, his body twisting in the air as he squeezed through just as the creature lunged. For a moment, Max felt the rush of victory, but he didn't stop. He kept running, zigzagging between trees, trying to throw the creature off his trail. He couldn't afford to let up, not when his life was on the line. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest, but he pushed through the pain. He didn't know how long he ran, but eventually, the sounds of the creature's pursuit faded. Max slowed to a stop, panting heavily. His heart was still racing, his mind spinning from the adrenaline. He looked around, his chest heaving as he tried to steady his breathing. It was then that he realized how far he had run. The clearing was gone, and the trees had grown denser. He had crossed into another part of the forest, one that looked even darker and more foreboding. Max hesitated for a moment, but he knew he couldn't stop now. He needed shelter, and he needed it quickly. Max glanced around, looking for any sign of a safe place to rest. His eyes fell on a cluster of large, twisted roots that seemed to form a natural shelter under a towering tree. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. He moved toward it, pushing past thick vines and branches, his body aching with every step as he crawled under the roots. He finally allowed himself a moment to catch his breath. He closed his eyes, his mind racing with thoughts of what he had just experienced. The creature had been relentless, but he had managed to outrun it, for now. He had survived, just as the Queen had asked him to do. But Max wasn't foolish. He knew that this was only the beginning. The Queen's trials were far from over, and he had a long way to go before he could truly prove himself worthy. He wasn't out of danger yet, and he couldn't afford to relax. He lay back against the cool earth, the sound of distant creatures echoing in the forest around him. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to close his eyes, to rest. But deep down, he knew that this was just the first trial. There would be more to face, more dangers to survive, and he would need all his strength, all his wits to make it through. Max's eyes snapped open, his resolve hardening. He wouldn't fail. Not when the Queen's respect and his future were on the line. Max woke up to the sounds of distant birds calling and the soft rustling of leaves. His body ached from the night spent lying under the twisted roots, but he didn't have time to linger. He had completed the first task, surviving the creature, but that didn't mean he was done. The sun was already rising, casting an eerie light through the thick canopy above. He stood up slowly, stretching his arms and legs. The exhaustion weighed on him, but he couldn't afford to rest too long. There was still the matter of the second part of the trial, food. Max's stomach growled, reminding him that he hadn't eaten since the previous day. But finding food on Zerelia wasn't going to be as simple as grabbing an apple off a tree. The environment here was unforgiving. The plants weren't like those on Earth. They were either too dangerous to eat or simply too strange to know what to do with. He'd have to be careful. He took a deep breath and scanned the area. The thick forest stretched on endlessly, filled with towering trees, dense underbrush, and hidden dangers. But Max wasn't about to give up. He had made it this far, and he was determined to prove that he could handle whatever came next. Max started moving again, keeping his eyes open for anything that might resemble edible plants. He spotted a cluster of colorful berries growing on a vine near the base of a tree. The vibrant colors made them look inviting, but he had learned his lesson from the previous day. In a place like this, nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. He bent down carefully, plucking one of the berries and holding it up to his nose. It smelled sweet, but that didn't mean it was safe. He hesitated for a moment, then decided to take a small bite. His heart raced as he chewed, half expecting something terrible to happen. But to his relief, the berry tasted fine. It wasn't the most delicious thing he had ever eaten, but it was enough to ease the hunger gnawing at his stomach. He picked a few more, stuffing them into his pockets for later. As he moved on, he felt a strange sense of accomplishment. He had found food, and he had survived the first trial. But he wasn't fooling himself. This was just the beginning. Vera had warned him that the trials would only get harder. Max continued to search the forest for anything else he could use: food, water, shelter. He needed to gather enough supplies to last the day, and if he was lucky, he might even find something that could help him with the next trial. Hours passed as he ventured deeper into the forest. The air was thick and heavy with moisture, and the constant chirping of unknown creatures kept him on edge. Every once in a while, Max would spot something that caught his eye, a strange plant or an unusual rock formation, but nothing that seemed useful. His thoughts began to wander. Was he really cut out for this? He was starting to question whether he could truly make it through this world, let alone earn the Queen's respect. But then he remembered the reason he was here: to prove himself. Not just to Vera, but to himself. He had always been the type to rise to a challenge. And if this was what it took to stand beside the Queen, then he would face whatever came his way. He pushed the doubts aside and focused. The forest was vast, and every step took him further from his starting point. But soon, he caught sight of something familiar. A small stream, trickling through the rocks and moss. Max moved toward it, the sound of running water soothing his mind. It was the first real sign of civilization, even if it was just nature's handiwork. He knelt beside the stream, cupping his hands to drink. The cool water was refreshing, washing away the sweat and grime of the day's journey. As he drank, he heard a rustling behind him. His senses immediately went on alert, and he spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon at his side, though he knew it wouldn't do much good here. But it wasn't an animal. It was Vera. She emerged from the trees with a fluid grace, her purple skin shimmering in the fading light. She stood tall, her eyes fixed on Max as she walked toward him, her expression unreadable. "Impressive," she said, her voice calm, but with an edge of approval. "You've completed the first part of the trial, but you are far from finished." Max stood up, dusting off his pants. "I survived the creature, found food and water. Isn't that enough?" Vera's lips curled slightly, though her gaze remained sharp. "Survival is only the beginning. The true test lies in your ability to adapt to this world. You must prove that you can think beyond your human instincts. If you can't do that, then no amount of strength will save you." Max felt a chill run down his spine, but he stood firm. "I'm not backing down. You said I had to prove myself, and that's exactly what I intend to do." Vera's eyes studied him for a long moment before she nodded. "We shall see. There is a path ahead that you must follow, but it will not be easy." Max glanced in the direction she had come from. "What path?" Vera didn't answer directly. Instead, she gestured toward a dense thicket of trees in the distance. "That is where the next trial begins. If you wish to continue, you must reach the heart of the forest before the sun sets." Max looked at the darkening sky, his heart racing. The forest was vast, and the sun was quickly sinking lower on the horizon. He knew the journey would be difficult, but there was no turning back now. He looked at the Queen. "I'll make it. Just watch." With that, he turned and started walking toward the thicket. The weight of the trials was heavy on his shoulders, but he didn't slow down. He would prove himself worthy. He had no choice but to push forward. Vera watched him for a moment before turning to leave, her footsteps barely making a sound in the dense underbrush. Max knew she was watching him from afar, waiting to see how he would handle the next challenge. But he didn't care. He had already decided. Failure wasn't an option. As he pushed through the trees, he could feel the intensity of the trial, pressing down on him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about proving that he was capable of standing beside a queen. The forest grew darker, the shadows lengthening as the sun dipped below the horizon. Max's resolve only strengthened. The next trial was waiting, and he would face it head-on. Max's feet crunched against the underbrush as he made his way deeper into the heart of the forest. The sun had nearly set, and the forest was bathed in a soft, silvery glow as the moon began to rise. It was an eerie light, almost otherworldly, and Max couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The path ahead was narrow and winding, and every step seemed to bring him deeper into the unknown. He had no idea what awaited him in the heart of the forest, but one thing was clear. He had to make it there before the sun completely disappeared. The shadows were growing longer, and the air was thick with humidity. He could feel it sticking to his skin, making each movement feel heavier than the last. He pushed through the dense foliage, his mind racing. The first trial had been a test of survival, the second, a test of resourcefulness. But this, the Queen had said, was different. This trial would test his mind, his ability to think quickly and adapt to whatever challenge was thrown at him. Max wasn't sure what kind of test awaited him, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. The further he went, the more the forest seemed to close in around him. The trees were enormous, their trunks twisting and winding in strange patterns. The roots, above the ground, seemed to stretch out like veins, as if the forest itself was alive, pulsing with energy. The deeper he went, the more he felt like he was walking through a living, breathing entity. Max's breath came quicker now, his legs burning from the strain of moving through the dense forest. He needed to keep moving. He couldn't afford to waste any more time. He had no idea how long the path was, how much further he had to go. All he knew was that he had to reach the heart of the forest before it was too late. And then he saw it. In the distance, a faint glow lit up the darkness, casting a strange, shimmering light against the trees. It was a small clearing, but the light that came from it was unlike anything Max had ever seen. It was soft, almost ethereal, and it seemed to beckon him forward. His instincts told him that this was the place he needed to reach. Max's pulse quickened as he pushed forward, his legs growing heavier with every step. He could see the clearing more clearly now, and the glow grew stronger as he neared it. The light seemed to be coming from a strange, pulsating stone in the center of the clearing. It was large, about the size of a small boulder, and it radiated a soft, calming energy. As Max stepped into the clearing, he felt the temperature drop slightly, the air growing cooler and more serene. It was as if the very air in this space was different, alive with energy. He felt drawn to the stone, compelled to get closer. He approached cautiously, every instinct on high alert. The stone was covered in intricate patterns, glowing faintly, with the same ethereal light. It was unlike anything Max had ever seen, and he couldn't help but feel that it held some kind of significance. As he reached out to touch it, a voice echoed through the clearing. "You've made it this far." Max froze. The voice was unmistakably Vera's. It wasn't loud, but it carried through the space like a command. He turned around to find her standing just beyond the clearing, her presence as commanding as ever. "You've reached the heart of the forest," she said, her gaze steady. "But this trial isn't as simple as reaching a destination." Max took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. "What do I need to do?" Vera stepped closer, her eyes fixed on the glowing stone. "That stone is a key. It holds the power to unlock the final part of the trial. But it will not reveal its secrets easily. It will test your resolve, your ability to push beyond your limits." Max stepped closer to the stone, his hand hovering above it. "And what do I have to do to unlock it?" "You must prove that you are worthy of what it holds," Vera replied, her voice almost a whisper. "You've made it this far because you've relied on your instincts, your resourcefulness. But this is different. This trial will force you to confront your doubts, your fears." Max's brow furrowed as he looked at the stone. He had faced danger, monsters, and the harsh environment of Xerilia, but now it seemed like the real test was something far more personal. He wasn't sure what he feared most: failure, rejection, or the possibility that he wasn't truly cut out for this. Vera watched him carefully, her expression unreadable. To unlock the stone, you must make a choice that will either set you free or bind you forever. The stone will show you a path, one that you must walk alone. Max swallowed, his throat dry. He didn't like the sound of that. "What happens if I choose wrong?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Vera's eyes flashed with something unreadable. "Then you will leave this place, and the trial will be over. You will not have the Queen's respect, and you will return to your world. But nothing will be the same." Max stepped closer to the stone, his hand finally touching its surface. It was warm to the touch, and the patterns on it began to shift, glowing brighter as his fingers made contact. He could feel something pulsing beneath his fingertips, a strange energy coursing through him. Suddenly, the stone flashed, and the world around Max seemed to tilt. The ground beneath him shifted, and he was no longer standing in the clearing. Instead, he found himself in a different place entirely. A vast, endless desert, the sky above a deep, oppressive red. He looked around, his heart racing. He was alone in the desert. The air was thick with heat, and the ground beneath him was cracked and dry. There was no sign of life, no indication of where he was or how to escape. "Make your choice, Max." Vera's voice echoed through the desert, coming from nowhere and everywhere all at once. Max's mind raced. This was part of the trial. He had to confront whatever fears or doubts had brought him here, and he had to make a decision. Max closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He had come this far, and he wouldn't back down now. He wasn't here to run from his fears. He was here to prove that he had what it took to survive, to stand beside the Queen. He made his decision. It wasn't just about surviving the trials. It was about proving that he could face whatever came next, no matter the cost. When he opened his eyes, the desert had vanished. He was back in the clearing, standing before the stone. The patterns on it had stopped glowing, and the stone was silent once more. Vera stood before him, her eyes watching him closely. She didn't say a word, but the look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. He had made it. Max stood in the clearing, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The stone had stopped glowing, its ethereal light fading to nothing as the trial finally came to an end. His heart was pounding in his chest, the adrenaline still rushing through his veins. He had faced the desert, confronted his own doubts, and made a decision, a choice that had brought him back to this moment, standing before the Queen. Vera stood a few steps away, her eyes never leaving him. There was a silence between them, a tension that seemed to hang in the air like a heavy fog. Max didn't know what to say, what to expect. He had made it through the trials. But was that enough? Had he proven himself worthy of standing beside her? Finally, Vera spoke, her voice low but clear. "You've made it farther than most would have." Her words were calm, but there was a sense of respect in them that wasn't there before. "You've faced the trials, and you've survived." Max's heart skipped a beat. That's all it took? Surviving? Vera's lips curved into a slight smile, though her expression remained serious. Surviving is only part of it. The trials were never meant to be easy. They were meant to test your ability to endure, to adapt. But the most important part of the trial was your ability to choose, to face your fears and make a decision no matter the cost. Max nodded slowly, understanding now. It hadn't been about brute strength or surviving the dangers of the forest. It had been about something deeper, the ability to confront his own weaknesses and fears, to choose the path he wanted to take, and to keep moving forward, no matter how difficult it seemed. You faced the desert alone, and you chose to confront your doubts, Vera continued, her voice softening slightly. You didn't back down, and that is what matters. Max couldn't help but smile, relief flooding through him. I guess I wasn't as lost as I thought. Vera stepped forward, her gaze still intense, but now there was a hint of something else in her eyes. Admiration, perhaps. You have more than just the strength to survive, Max. You have the will to push forward, to keep going even when everything around you seems impossible. She paused, her eyes searching his face as if weighing him, deciding. You've earned my respect. You've proven yourself worthy. Max's heart soared at her words, but there was still one question he needed to ask, the one that had been on his mind since the beginning. And what about the other thing? The marriage? The partnership you mentioned? Vera's expression softened, the fierce queen fading slightly as she regarded him with a more human gaze. Partnership, she mused. You sought a union, a bond between us. But it was never about a title, Max. It was always about proving that we could stand together, not as a queen and a human, but as equals. Max's chest tightened, his mind racing. Equals? You mean you and me working together? Vera nodded slowly. You've shown that you can be more than just a diplomat or a survivor. You can be a leader, someone who thinks not just about the present, but about the future. Someone who understands that true power doesn't come from fear or control, but from unity. Max took a deep breath, the weight of her words sinking in. This wasn't just about love or a political alliance. This was about something more profound. It was about trust, mutual respect, and the strength that came from joining forces, not as master and servant, but as equals. For the first time, he truly understood what she had meant by the trials. It wasn't about passing tests or surviving, dangerous creatures. It was about building a connection, one that could change both of their worlds forever. I don't need a crown to stand beside you, Max said, his voice steady, his resolve clear. I don't need a title. I just want to stand with you, to face whatever comes next. Vera studied him for a long moment, her gaze never wavering. Then, to Max's surprise, she smiled. It was a small smile, but it was genuine. Then, you are ready, she said softly. Max exhaled, his shoulders relaxing as the last of his doubts melted away. He had done it. He had faced the trials, survived, and earned her respect. But more importantly, he had found something he hadn't expected, a sense of purpose, a bond that was deeper than mere survival. He hadn't just proven himself to the queen. He had proven to himself that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined. Let's make this work, he said, his voice filled with determination. Together. Vera's smile widened just a fraction, and for the first time, Max saw a glimpse of the woman behind the throne. The queen who had ruled with strength, intelligence, and unwavering resolve. And now the queen who would stand beside him, facing whatever challenges the future held. She nodded, her gaze steady. Together, she repeated. Max couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the way the universe had unfolded before him. He had come here to negotiate a treaty, to survive the trials, but he had found something far greater. He had found a partner, someone who would challenge him, but also stand by him. And with that, Max knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. As the moon rose higher in the sky, casting its pale light across the clearing, Max and Vera stood side by side, looking out at the future. The trials were over, but their journey was just beginning. Together.